The Tale of the Unextinguished Moon by Boris Pilnyak. Introduction. The plot of the story suggests that the death of M.V. Froons furnished the occasion and material for it. Personally, I knew Froons very slightly, was barely acquainted with him, having met him perhaps twice. I do not know the actual details of his death, and to me they are not essential because the purpose of my story is anything but a report on the death of the People's Commissar for Military Affairs. I find it necessary to inform the reader about all this, lest he should look for facts and real people in the story. Boris Pilnyak, Moscow, January 28th, 1926. Chapter 1. At dawn, factory whistles sounded over the city. A grey murk of night fog and sleet trailed in alleyways, dissolving in a dawn that seemed likely to be cheerless, frosty, and grey. Factory whistles wailed a long time, slowly. 1, 2, 3, many of them, merging into a grey howl over the city. In this hushed hour before dawn, factories wailed. But from the outskirts came shrill, irritating whistles of railway engines arriving and departing, and it was quite clear that these wailings came from the city, the soul of the city now befouled with grey murk. At that hour in newspaper printing plants, rotary presses were bringing out the final copies of the papers, and soon, from the dispatch yards, boys were hurrying through the streets with bundles of paper. 1 or 2 of them stood at deserted corners shouting as if in rehearsal for the day's shouting ahead. "Revolution in China! Army Commander Garilov arrives! Army Commander sick!" It was at that hour that a train drew in at the station where trains from the south arrive. It was a special train. At the end of it was a blue lounge car, quiet, with sentries on the footboards and heavy curtains drawn behind plate glass windows. Its sides gleamed grayish where light struck them. The train had come out of the black night, from fields that had squandered the summer on luxuries, and now had only winter left, fields that had been plundered in summer and abandoned to a hoary old age. Slowly and with little noise the train crept beneath the roof of the station and was switched to a siding. The platform was deserted. It was no doubt by chance that extra militia with green stripes on their uniforms stood at the gates. 3 officers with rhomboids on their sleeves went through the lounge car. There, they returned salutes and stood for a while by the steps as the sentry whispered to someone inside the car. Then the 3 went up the steps and disappeared behind door hangings. Electric light flashed on in the car. 2 army electricians began bustling about, stringing telephone wires to the car under the station roof. A man, wearing a threadbare spring coat and an unseasonable fur cap with ear flaps, approached the car. The man saluted no one, and no one saluted him. He said, "Tell Nikolai Ivanovich that Popov is here." The Red Army man looked slowly at Popov, examined him, noted his worn, unpolished shoes, and replied slowly, "The comrade army commander isn't up yet." Popov gave the Red Army man a friendly smile and for some reason began to speak in a familiar manner. He said amicably, "That doesn't matter, Sonny. Just you go and tell him that Popov is here." The Red Army man went in and came back again. Then Popov climbed up into the car. Night was still trapped there. The curtains were drawn, and the electric light was burning. The south was trapped in the lounge, since the train had come from the south. There was a smell of pomegranates, oranges, pears, good wine, good tobacco. There was a smell of the benedictions of southern climes. On the table next to the lamp lay an open book, and near to it was a plate with some half-eaten gruel. Behind the plate lay an unbuttoned Colt holster, its leather strap twisted like a snake. At the other end of the table stood several opened bottles. The 3 officers with rhomboids on their sleeves sat in leather armchairs to one side of the table along the wall, sat very respectfully at attention, holding their briefcases in silence. Popov squeezed behind the table, took off his coat and cap, laid them beside him, picked up the open book and glanced at it. An attendant, indifferent to everything in the world, came and cleared the table. The bottles he put somewhere in a corner. He brushed pomegranate rinds onto a small tray, and having spread a tablecloth, placed it on a solitary glass in a holder. A plate of stale bread, an egg cup. He brought in 2 eggs on a plate, salt, several small medicine bottles. He lifted a corner of a curtain, took a look at the morning, then drew the curtain back from the windows. The cords made a forlorn hissing sound and switched off the light. Into the lounge crept a grey, frosty autumn morning. Everything became very ordinary. In the corner, one could discern a crate of wine bottles and a rolled-up carpet. The attendant stood in the doorway, like a statue, motionless, with a napkin in his hands. Every face was yellow in the gloom of the morning. The thin, watery light was like a yellowish discharge from an infected wound. An orderly appeared in the doorway and stood next to the attendant. The field office was already in operation. The ringing of the telephone broke the silence. Then the army commander came out of the sleeping compartment into the lounge. He was a rather short, broad-shouldered man, fair, with long hair combed back. His tunic of green army cloth with 4 rhomboids on the sleeve was ill-fitting and wrinkled. Although his spurred boots had been polished with the utmost care, their worn-down heels bore witness to long service. This was a man whose name stood for the heroism of the Civil War. For the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of men who stood behind him, for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of deaths, agonies, mutilations, for the cold hunger, the ice-covered ground, and the scorching heat of long marches, for the thunder of cannon, the whistle of bullets and night winds, for bonfires in the night, for marches, victories, and routs, and again for death. This was a man who had command over armies, over thousands of men, who had command over men, victories, death, over gunpowder, smoke, broken bone, torn flesh, over those victories which vast crowds with hundreds of red banners had acclaimed in the rear and of which the news had flown by radio around the world. Those victories after which deep holes had been dug in the sandy soil of Russia for the corpses, holes into which thousands of human bodies were flung in heaps. This was a man whose name was overgrown with legends of wars, feats of leadership, boundless valor, boldness, stubborn determination. This was a man who had the right and the will to send men to kill other men and to die. Into the lounge walked a rather short, broad-shouldered man with the good-natured, slightly weary face of a seminarian. He walked quickly, and his gait revealed both a cavalryman and a man who was very much a civilian, not at all a soldier. The 3 staff officers sprang to attention. For them, he was the man at the wheel of that enormous machine, known as the army, who commanded their lives, mainly their lives, successes, careers, failures, their lives but not their deaths. The commander halted in front of them, did not offer his hand, made the sign that allowed them to stand at ease, and in this way, standing in front of them, the commander heard their reports. Each of the 3 stepped forward, came to attention, and reported. As commander of, in the service of the revolution, the commander shook hands with each man in turn as he finished his report, probably without having listened to the reports. He then sat down in front of the solitary glass, and the attendant suddenly appeared to pour tea from a gleaming teapot. The commander picked up an egg. "How are things going?" the commander asked simply, brushing aside formalities. One of the 3 began speaking, told him the news, and then asked in his turn, "How is your health, Comrade Garilov?" For a brief moment, the commander's face took on a distant expression. He said, with some annoyance, "Well, I've been in the Caucasus for treatment. I'm all right now." He paused. "I'm well now." He paused. "See to it that there are no official welcomes, no guards of honor, in general. He paused. "You may go, comrades." The 3 staff officers rose to go. The commander shook hands with each of them without getting up. They left the lounge silently. When the commander came into the lounge, Popov had not greeted him. He had picked up the book and turned away from the commander as he leafed through it. The commander had given Popov a sidelong glance and had not greeted him either, pretending not to have noticed the man. When the staff officers had left, the commander asked Popov, still without a word of greeting, as if they had seen each other the evening before, "Would you like some tea or wine, Alyosha?" Popov had not the time to reply because an orderly stepped forward and began to make his report to the comrade commander. The automobile had been unloaded from the flat car. Some official letters had been delivered to the office. One of the letters was from house number 1. It was marked secret, had been brought by his secretary. An apartment had been made ready for him at staff headquarters. A pile of telegrams and letters of welcome had arrived. The commander dismissed the orderly, saying that he would continue to live in the car. The commander had not come to rejoin his army, but to visit an alien city. His own city, where his army was, lay several thousand versts away. It was there in that city, in that area, that he had left his concerns, cares, the routine of his life, his wife. The attendant, without waiting for Popov's answer, placed 2 glasses on the table, one for tea and the other for wine. Popov got out of his corner and sat down by the commander. "How's your health, Nikolasha?" Popov asked with concern, as a brother might. "My health is as it should be. I'm back to normal. I'm well, but who knows? Perhaps you'll have to stand in guard of honor by my coffin," Garoloff replied, perhaps joking, perhaps in earnest. If it was a joke, it was a grim one. These 2, Popov and Garoloff, were bound by ties of long-standing friendship, by the underground work which they had carried on side by side, by their work together at a factory long ago in their young days when they had started life as weavers in Orekovo-Suryevo. There in their youth was lost the river Kliazma, the woods beyond the Kliazma, along the road to the town of Pokrov. To the Pokrov hideaway where the committee men met. There was their ragged weaver's youth with underground pamphlets, with editions of Don Sakaresh, with Iskra like the Bible, with workers' barracks meetings, secret addresses, with the wide square in front of the railroad station, where in 1905 Cossacks' bullets and lashes whistled over crowds of workers. Later, they were prisoners together at Bogorsk, and still later, they shared the life of professional revolutionaries. Exile, escape, underground work, Taganaksaya, transit, prison, exile, escape, emigration, Paris, Vienna, Chicago, and then the thunderclouds of 1914. Brindisi, Salonika, Romania, Kiev, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and then the storm of 1917, the Smolny. October, the roar of cannon over the Moscow Kremlin. And finally, one of them is chief of staff of the Red Guards in Rostov-on-the-Don, and the other the elected representative of the proletarian nobility, as Rykov wittily remarked. In Tula, for one in those days, wars, victories, command over cannon, men, and death. For the other, provincial committees, executive committees, the Supreme Economic Council, conferences, meetings, projects, and reports. For both of them, everything, life, thoughts devoted to the greatest revolution in the world, the greatest justice and truth in the world. But to each other, they had always remained Nikolasha and Alexei Aloyshka, always the close friends of their textile mill days, without rank or formality. "Tell me, Nikolasha, how is your health?" Popov asked. "Well, it's like this. I had a stomach ulcer. Perhaps I still have it. You know, pains, vomiting, blood, terrible heartburn, nasty business." The commander spoke quietly, leaning toward Alexei. "They sent me to the Caucasus for treatment. The pain subsided. I returned to work, carried on for 6 months, and then, again, nausea, pains. I went back to the Caucasus. Now the pains are gone again. I even drank a bottle of wine, just to see what would happen. The commander interrupted himself. If you'd like some wine, Alyoshka, there's some under the seat. I brought you a small case. Open a bottle. Popov sat leaning his head on the palm of his hand. He replied, No, I don't drink in the morning. Go on. Well, so, my health is in perfect order. The commander paused. Tell me, Alyushka, why have I been summoned here? Do you know? No. An order came to leave directly from the Caucasus. I didn't even stop off to see my wife. The commander paused. Devil only knows what it can be. I can't think of anything. As far as the army goes, everything is in order. There are no conferences, nothing at all. Have you ever been to the Caucasus? That is truly a wonderful country. Our poets call it the southern clime. I could not understand it. Why such an expression? I went there, and it's true. It is the southern clime. Have a pomegranate, Alyosha. I can't eat them. I treat orderlies to them. How are things going? The commander talked about the army and the war, and was doubtless unaware that when he talked about the army, he ceased to be a weaver and became a leader of men, a red general of the Red Army. The commander talked about Orekovo, Suyevo, and their life there, and was doubtless unaware that he then became a weaver, the same weaver who had fallen in love with a school teacher from the other side of the river, who had polished his boots for her sake, and walked to her school barefoot to keep them from getting dusty, putting them on only when he reached a little wood near the school. The same weaver who had bought a fancy shirt with a bow tie and a hat a la devil-may-care. Yet, somehow, he never got any further with the teacher than talking about political pamphlets with her. Nothing came of their friendship. The teacher turned him down. The commander weaver was a good, easygoing man who liked to joke and could see the funny side of things, and now he joked as he talked with his friend. Only now and then would he suddenly return to the present and become restless. He remembered the mysterious summons. He shifted awkwardly, and then it was a healthy weaver talking about a sick commander. A bigwig, a field marshal, a senator. What a laugh! And I can't even eat buckwheat porridge. Yes, my friend, the Central Committee plays strange tricks on a man. You have to take it as it comes. He retreated into silence. Don't beat about the bush, Nikolasha. Tell me, what do you suspect? Said Popov. What was all that about a guard of honor? The commander replied slowly, after a pause. In Rostov, I met Potap. He used the name by which a leading revolutionary, one of the glorious band of 1918, was known within the party. Well, he told me, he tried to persuade me to have an operation, to have the ulcer removed, or perhaps have it sewed up. There was something suspicious about the way he tried to persuade me. The commander fell silent. I feel in good health. Everything in me revolts against the operation. I don't want it. I'll get well without it. After all, there are no pains at all now. I've put on weight, and damn it all, I'm a grown man, an old man already, a bigwig, and I have to worry about my belly. I feel ashamed. The commander paused, picked up the open book. I'm reading Old Man Tolstoy. Childhood and boyhood. The old man wrote well. He had a feeling for life, for the instincts in our blood. I've seen enough blood, but I'm afraid of the operation like a kid. I don't want it. They'll kill me. How well the old man understood what human blood means. An orderly entered, came to attention, made his report. They had brought a dispatch from headquarters. An automobile from house number 1 had arrived for the commander. He was requested to go there. Some new telegrams had arrived. So-and-so had sent someone to pick up a package from the south. The orderly placed a pile of newspapers on the table. The commander dismissed the orderly. The commander ordered his greatcoat to be got ready. He unfolded a paper. In the section in which appeared accounts of the most important events of the day, the headline read, Army Commander Garilov arrives. And on the third page, it was reported that Commander Garilov arrives today. He has temporarily left his post in order to undergo an operation for a stomach ulcer. In the same paragraph, it was reported that Comrade Garilov's health gives grounds for concern, but that the professors are confident that the outcome of the operation will be positive. Garilov, the old fighter of the revolution, soldier, army commander, leader, who had set thousands of men to die, the apex of a military machine which existed to kill, to die, to spill blood for victory, leaned back in his chair, wiped his forehead, looked intently at Popov, said, "Listen to me, Alyoshka. There's something behind this. Yes, but what can I do?" And he shouted, "Orderly! My greatcoat!" The time was after 10 in the morning when the greenish haze of the day crept over the city, when actually this greenish haze was invisible, because over that patch of land where buildings were lined up, the city machine had started running, huge, very complex, whirling and pulling everything into its vortex, from drays, streetcars, and buses, from unmade beds in the houses to soldiers marching along the embankment, to the solemn quiet of the high-ceilinged bookkeeping halls and the offices of the people's commissariats. It was a complex city machine that sent rivers of people to their places in factories, at tables, behind desks, in automobiles, on the streets, a machine that obscured the grayish sky, sleet, slush, the green haze of the day.